Yo, I gotta ask you something real quick. You ever had one of those moments? And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment. The one where a door slams right in your face, where you can literally hear people laughing on the other side, where something deep inside you just cracks, breaks clean in half. But here's the thing nobody talks about. In that same moment, somewhere even deeper, something else lights up, like a spark catching in the dark. You feel it before you even understand it. Most people run from that moment, bury it, pretend it never happened. Bob Marley, he held on to it every single day, because without that moment, none of this exists. The music, the legend, none of it. And you never would have heard this story. My name is Scar, and what I'm about to tell you, this is just the beginning. Slow, heavy, black and white visuals drift across the streets of Kingston like smoke. Kingston, Jamaica, October 1963. The south side of the island was living in its own world back then, completely cut off from everything else. Dust kicking up on every street corner, rain hammering down on tin rooftops at night, and everywhere you turned, music, like it was seeping up through the ground itself, coming through the walls, slipping under the doors. Music wasn't entertainment in Kingston. Nah, it was survival. It was the thing that kept people standing when everything else tried to knock them down. And moving through those streets, this skinny 18-year-old kid, wasn't nothing flashy about him. Clothes were plain, pockets were basically empty. But there was something about him, something you couldn't name, like a gravitational pull. His eyes were always looking past things, past the street, past the buildings, past whatever was right in front of him, like he was seeing something nobody else could see yet. His name was Robert Nesta Marley, but everybody just called him Bob. That morning, Bob had dragged himself up way earlier than he wanted to. He'd just come off a night shift at the iron foundry, back-breaking work, the kind that leaves you feeling hollow, and only got maybe 3-4 hours of sleep. The shirt he threw on was clean but wrinkled. He didn't care. None of that mattered today, because today was audition day, Beverly's Records, one of the most established labels on the whole island. The owner, Leslie Kong, had a reputation that cut both ways. He'd either launched your career or he'd let you slip right through his fingers. Either way, people talked about him. Walking through Kong's door meant you were walking through the real door, the one that actually led somewhere. Bob strapped his guitar to his back, and when he stood up, he felt his hands shaking, just slightly, just enough to notice. He took 3 slow, deep breaths. Keep going, he told himself. Just keep going. There were 6 other people waiting in that lobby, every single one of them quiet, every single one of them tense. You could feel it in the room, that thick, heavy silence of people who all want the exact same thing. Just a chance, one chance. That's all any of them were asking for. Bob sat down. He waited. Time moved weird in that room. Felt like hours had gone by when really it wasn't even 40 minutes. Then a voice cut through from inside. Next. Bob stood up. He walked through that studio door, and what hit him first wasn't anything dramatic. It was just a desk. Big, messy, covered in papers and notes and an ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts. And behind it, a man, middle-aged, heavy-set, small, tired eyes that were glued to a stack of files. Didn't even look up when Bob walked in. There was an assistant standing off to the side, young guy, neatly dressed, open notebook in his hand. Sit, the assistant said. Polite but robotic, like he'd said it 1,000 times that day. Bob sat, pulled his guitar onto his lap. Name? Robert Marley, Bob. The assistant wrote it down. The man behind the desk still hadn't looked up. What are you playing today? Bob paused for just a second, then said, Something I wrote myself. That's when the man finally looked up. His eyes moved over Bob, top to bottom, bottom to top. 1 full second, no more than that. Then he looked back down at his files. Go ahead. Bob gripped the guitar, set his fingers on the strings, and he started to play. The song wasn't perfect. Some of the words were still finding their place, some of the transitions were rough around the edges, but there was something living inside it, something raw and fragile and completely real, a feeling, a story trying to push its way out. Bob closed his eyes while he played, and because his eyes were closed, he didn't see the man push the file to the side, didn't see him glance over at the assistant, didn't see the assistant give a small, quiet shake of his head. The last note faded out. Silence. Bob opened his eyes. The man was looking at him now, and that look, man, that look hit different. It wasn't angry, it wasn't mean. It was something almost worse than that. It was tired, impatient, like a decision had already been made before Bob even walked in the room. "Thanks for coming in," the man said. Flat voice, no warmth, no cold, just nothing. "We'll be in touch." Bob stood up, strapped his guitar back on, started walking toward the door. He was almost there when the assistant's voice stopped him. "Hey, hold up a second." Bob turned around. The assistant was holding out a small folded piece of paper. Bob took it, opened it, read it. It was written in pencil, quick, scratchy handwriting, like whoever wrote it didn't even think twice. No voice, no future, waste of time. Bob read it again, then again, not because he didn't understand it, but because some part of him couldn't make himself believe it was real. By the time he looked up, the assistant was already gone. He stepped outside and the sun just slapped him. Kingston was loud and alive the way it always was. People moving in every direction, vendors hollering, somebody's radio blasting from somewhere down the block. There was always music coming from somewhere in this city. Bob walked. He didn't know where he was going, didn't matter, he just walked. And he squeezed that piece of paper in his fist, tighter and tighter as his hand got warmer until it was crumpled up like it was nothing. But he didn't throw it away. He couldn't. Because there was something about that paper. It wasn't just an insult. It was more than that. It was sitting on his chest like a weight he couldn't shake off. And he couldn't fully name what it was, but he could feel it. That paper was a wall, and Bob was standing right in front of it. "Stop!" the wall was saying. "Go back! This isn't for you! No voice, no future!" He stopped walking. Right there in the middle of the sidewalk, people streaming past him on both sides, not a single one of them noticing. He looked down at the paper in his hand, then he folded it up, put it in his pocket, and kept walking. Now, here's where things get real. Because that night, that specific night, everything shifted. But before I tell you what happened, I need to tell you about the man who showed up in Bob's life that night. Because if you don't understand this man, you don't understand anything that comes after. His name was Maromro. Nobody could really tell you where he came from. Some people said Trinidad, some said he'd spent years in London, and some people, whenever his name came up, they'd just go quiet, like saying it out loud was enough to stir something up. Maromro wasn't a musician, wasn't a critic, didn't own a label, but music. He understood it on some other level, like you could play him a song one time and just once, and he'd tell you exactly where that song was headed, 10 years down the road. He'd just know. Was that a gift, intuition, something else entirely? I honestly don't know. What I do know is this. That night, Maromro was sitting alone in a small bar in one of Kingston's older neighborhoods, cold cup of coffee sitting in front of him. Not talking to anyone, not looking at his drink, just watching the door, like he was waiting for somebody specific to walk through it. Bob stumbled into that bar by accident. At least, that's what he told himself. He'd been walking for hours by that point. Legs were heavy, stomach was empty, no money for food. But he could get some water, he could sit down somewhere dark and quiet and just breathe. He pushed the door open and walked in. The place was small, dim. Few tables along the walls, an old bartender moving slow behind the counter, a beat-up radio running in the corner. Ska was coming through the static, warm and familiar, that classic Kingston pulse. Bob found a table and dropped into the chair. And that's when he saw him, a man sitting alone in the far corner, hard to say how old, eyes wide open but somehow looking inward, like he was watching something inside his own head. Cold coffee sitting untouched in front of him. The man looked at Bob. Bob looked away. But the man kept looking, and it wasn't uncomfortable or threatening. It was just steady, calm, like he was reading something in Bob that nobody else in that room could see. A few minutes passed, then the man got up, walked straight to Bob's table, didn't ask if he could sit down, just sat. "You came from an audition today," he said. Bob went completely still. "How did you got a guitar, your eyes are beat, but your shoulders—" He nodded slowly. "Your shoulders are carrying something else." Silence. "What are they carrying?" Bob asked, voice barely coming out. The man looked at him for a long moment, then, slowly, he smiled. First time. "Anger," he said, "but the right kind." Maromro didn't grill Bob with 100 questions that night. See, most people, when they sit across from somebody who's hurting, they ask the wrong stuff. "How you feeling?" "What happened?" "Why do you even want this?" Questions that sound deep but don't actually go anywhere. Maromro asked one thing. "What did that paper say?" Bob hesitated. Then he slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out the crumpled piece of paper, set it flat on the table between them. Maromro looked at it, read it, didn't say a word. Long silence. The ska kept playing low from the corner. The bartender was wiping down the counter like he had nowhere else to be. Then Maromro leaned back and said, "You know what the worst thing in the world is?" Bob waited. "The worst thing in the world is when the wrong person tells you no. Because the second somebody like that tells you no, you flip it. You start thinking you said no to yourself, like their limit is your limit." He shook his head. "It ain't. That man said no to the edges of his own imagination. That's all." Bob sat with that, didn't respond yet. "That guy in that studio today," Maromro continued, "how many people did he turn away?" "I don't know. There were others waiting." "And tomorrow? How many tomorrow?" Bob got it. He understood the point, but something wasn't settling right inside him yet. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then why does it still feel like this?" Maromro looked at him, really looked at him, like he was measuring something. "Because," he finally said, "you haven't heard your own voice yet, and when you don't know what your own voice sounds like, somebody else's words start to feel like yours." They sat in that bar until late, real late. Sometimes Maromro talked and Bob just listened. Sometimes Bob talked and Maromro just listened, back and forth like that. They never talked about music directly, not once, but somehow everything they said was soaked in it. Around midnight, Maromro stood up. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "get up early, grab your guitar, go to the beach, find a spot where there's nobody around, and play." "Play what?" "Whatever comes out." "What if it sounds bad?" Maromro stopped, turned back around. "It is gonna sound bad," he said. "That's not the point. The point is, for the first time in your life, you're gonna play just for you, not for that studio, not for that man behind the desk, not for anybody who might be listening, just for you." Bob looked up at him. "And one more thing," Maromro said. His eyes dropped to the table, to the paper. "Throw that away." Bob looked at his pocket. "Throw it away?" "Throw it away." Long silence. Bob reached in slowly, pulled the paper out, set it on the table, looked at it one last time. No voice, no future, waste of time. And he left it right there, walked out without it. Sun wasn't even fully up yet when Bob got to the beach. Kingston shoreline was dead quiet at that hour, just the sound of a boat somewhere out in the distance, waves coming in slow and easy, not a single person around for as far as he could see. Bob sat down in the sand, guitar in his lap, and he started to play. First few minutes were rough, like his hands forgot what they were doing. Notes came out wrong, rhythm kept slipping, nothing was connecting. But he kept going. And then, something changed. It's hard to put into words exactly. But at some point, the way his fingers touched the strings shifted. The way he was listening to the sound shifted. Like a door inside him swung open, and something on the other side started pouring through. Words showed up, half-formed, broken, not ready yet. But they were there. Melodies came that he'd never played before, but somehow already knew. Bob played. And that morning, sitting in the sand on the shores of Kingston, sun just starting to rise, nobody watching, nobody listening, nobody there to judge a single note, Bob Marley heard himself for the very first time. Scar's voice gets closer, more personal, like he's leaning in. I gotta stop right here for a second, because I need you to really hear this next part. As I tell this story, I feel it too. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I am. That moment on the beach, that quiet, invisible, nobody saw it moment, that was the real beginning. Not the rejection at the studio, not the paper, not even what Maromro said. It was that morning. A young man sitting in the sand, alone, playing music that nobody asked for and nobody applauded, playing it anyway. Because after that morning, everything was different. But here's what I need you to understand. The story doesn't end there. It doesn't even really start there. Why was Maromro sitting in that bar? Was that really just a coincidence? And that assistant, the one who handed Bob that paper, why did he do it? Was that just standard procedure? Or was something else going on that night? In the next chapter, you're going to hear a confession, made years later. A dying man in a quiet room with only one witness. A confession that's going to reframe everything you just heard. Everything. But before we get there, let me tell you one more thing. Something you need to know to understand the rest of this story. After that day, Bob went back to Beverly's Records. Not once, multiple times. Every single time he got turned away. Sometimes at the door. Sometimes he'd get inside, play his set, and get sent home in silence. But something was different now. That paper wasn't in his pocket anymore, and every time he got rejected, he didn't go home. He went to the beach, sat in the sand, picked up his guitar and played. Maromro was there sometimes. Sometimes he wasn't. But those words were always there. Play just for you. So Bob played. Weeks went by, months went by, and then one day, nobody knows exactly when, it's not written down anywhere, there's no record of it. But one day that studio door didn't close in his face. It stayed open. What was on the other side of that open door? I want to tell you, I really do. But this chapter ends here because this story is too big to fit in one sitting. And you right now, you just read the first page. I'm promising you right now, in the next chapter, I'm going to show you what was waiting behind that door. You're going to see Maromro for who he really was. You're going to find out why he was sitting in that bar that specific night. And you're going to hear what that assistant, the one who wrote that note, confessed on his deathbed years later in a room with only one witness. All you got to do to hear it is stay. That's it. Just stay. Because this is only the beginning. And every great story, every single one, starts with a breaking point. We found Bob Marley's. Now it's time to find out what grew out of it. Scar's voice slows down, drops to almost a whisper. Kingston. A studio hallway, a piece of paper, a bar, a stranger, and a morning on the beach where a young man sat alone in the sand and played music for no one but himself. That's where this all comes from. And this story, it ain't over, not even close. I'll see you in the next one. I'm Scar. Maromro's Secret, what really happened in that bar that night. Coming soon. Subscribe, don't miss it.